Next, please. Well, and then we arrive to the indigenous script. I still use the quotation marks because this is relative, and I think if you have another insight or another hypothesis is fine. I'm open to that. Next slide. So here we can see the development of the script around Indonesia archipelago, from the Palava and the Kawi, and then developed to the indigenous scripts. Next. I can mention several scripts from Sumatra. There are Jawi or Arabic Malay or Arabic Nusantara, you can say. The Javi script came later from the connection with Arabic trader, and then also Palembang script, variant of Jawi, and also there's Surat Batak or Batakis or Batak script with various type, and then Surat Ulu and Lampung. Also, there are two controversial scripts in Sumatra, which is Gayo in Aceh and Tambo Alam in Minangkabau. Next, please. This is a sample of the Javi script. Maybe it can be found also in Malay and Singapore and Brunei, perhaps, because it's used Malay language with Arabic script, and several characters of this script has been developed to accommodate the sound of Malay language, like che, which does not exist in Arabic, che, ge, and etc. Next, please. This is the Surat Batak or Batak script. Can say an expert of this script, Mr. Uli Kozok, Professor Uli Kozok, and it's now still used in several places in North Sumatra. Next, please. This is the variation of Surat Ulu script. We can see there is a Rejang, Kerinci, and also Lampung, I think. The script categorization is debatable, so I will not discuss it here. Maybe we need to talk with another expert of this script. Next, please. This is the Lampung script. You can see on the left side the white picture. The Lampung script is used side by side with the Jawi script. So it's quite obvious that this culture live together. Next. Now this is a controversial one. We can skip. Next. In Java, the major scripts used are Cacarakan or Java script. In Java, it's called Carakan or Hana Caraka. In Sunda, it's called Cacarakan, slightly different, but the same. We have also the Sunda, indigenous Sundanese script, old and standard, and also Pegon, the variation of Arabic in Javanese or Sundanese language, and also in Madurese language. Next. This is samples of the Javanese script used in paper, European paper, or tree bark paper, and also on the palm leaf. Next. The Javanese script also used in the press or for the industrial production, publication. So this is using the metal type to make it more accessible for the publication. Next. This is the old Sundanese script, and most of them used on the palm leaf, like in Bali. Next. It is a comparison between the Sundanese and Javanese, the modern Sundanese and Javanese. Next. And Bali, I believe we have an expert here, Pak Jakorda, can explain about the Balinese and the Lombok perhaps, but in general I can use two variation of the language, the script, which is Aksara Bali or Balinese, and Aksara Sasak, which is slightly different but more or less the same. Next. Yeah, this is the sample of the Balinese script from the Dreams project. Next. Also the Sasak script. It's obvious, similar, but in some case not the same. Next. Yeah, this is the alphabet of Balinese, the consonant. Next. And then the Pagan script, the Arabic script, which developed to accommodate the Javanese, Sundanese, and Madurese language. So maybe Arabic person can read some script, but the language is very different. It is Sundanese and Javanese. Next. And Eastern Islands, this is from the eastern part of Indonesia. There are this is another script from Sulawesi. It's called Jangang-Jangang script or bird script because of the shape similar to bird. Next. Another type, Bilang-Bilang script. Next. Another one, Satria Jontao. Next. Yeah, this is another archaic of Bima script. It's similar to Bugis or Rontara script. Next. Here we found also the Arabic script written for the Makassar language, which is called Aksara Serang. As you can see, it is Arabic, but maybe we cannot read it well because it's used Makassar or Bugis language and Buri Wolio for the Wolio language in Makassar. Next. In past several years, I think, there are revival efforts in the modern time to preserve and develop the ancient script heritage. Next. Like we can see in Bali, in West Java, in Central Java, in Yogyakarta, there are many things happened to the script. For example, it is included to the educational curriculum. So it is taught in schools, and it is very interesting. Next. And also used as the governmental name, office name. And perhaps in Bali we can see a long way from the airport, the ornaments are using the Balinese script. We can see from the picture in Bali, in Surakarta, in Central Java, and then also in Sulawesi, also in West Java, in Bandung, using the indigenous script. Next. The font resources is now also available on internet. We can freely download and install the fonts on our desktops. And also, perhaps for who are using the Android, it is now also available for the Android. Next. The applications also developed by communities, which can be found in Google Play Store. Various type of the application like learning, quiz, or like translator, converter, something like that. It's now available. You can choose freely and install it. Next. And the more technology developed, the more compatible the script to be used in the computer. So we can see there is a website developed by communities and supported by Pandi, which are using the Javanese, Balinese, and Sundanese scripts. And also, we can see community using the Balinese script, also Sundanese and Buginese in computer in this day. Next. And this is the most important, I think, the community movements. As we can see that the enthusiasts from the indigenous scripts in Indonesia is about rising. The more people aware and using their indigenous script, even maybe the daily use of the indigenous script is not as strong as the Latin script, but I can see the revival of this indigenous script by community. Next. The community also move on the social media like Instagram, Twitter, and many other social media platforms. This is from Instagram. Next. This is from Facebook. You can search many communities regarding to these indigenous scripts. Next. From the creative perspective, the community also developed many souvenirs, like shirts, books, clocks, and memes using the indigenous scripts. Next. That's the end. Thank you so much. Matur suksma. And we hope we can discuss it more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Give applause for Bapak Ilham Nurwansa, who gave a very interesting discussion on how indigenous languages are now rising to the better stage, I think, and to the more creative communities to come to industry as well, to creative merchandise, something like that, from untouched things to be familiar thing to deal with in everyday life. Okay, so very interesting. Now we are going to proceed to the next presenter. I'm going to invite Ibu Sarah, Ibu Dr. Sarah, to give the presentation. For Ibu Sarah, time is yours. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, everyone, good morning. I hope you can hear me well. Okay, so maybe we can start with the slides. Thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me today. Actually, it was kind of a surprise because I was wondering, as an anthropologist, what could I do in such an important forum? But it's also an honor actually. So maybe my job here will be to try to get a different perspective, a slightly different perspective, on the question of indigenous cultures, languages, and scripts in the era of Industry 4.0. So, next slide, please. Actually, we're going to discuss here about sources. I mean by sources, heritage, culture, performing arts, language, education, religion, how we can use them, how they are active and present in our society, building intercultural communication every day, and how we can also mobilize them for the future, always reminding that we have to deal with sustainability issues, including cultural and environmental stewardship. Next slide, please. So first, I would like to, let's say, interrupt a little bit to go back to definitions about culture mainly, because culture has been discussed widely for at least a huge century, but new research and the local trend now in anthropology is to consider culture as a process, as the result of branchement. It's a French word, French concept brought by Jean-Louis Amsel in 2001. By branchement, Jean-Louis Amsel means connections or a network without a pure beginning or end, a way of reflecting upon culture, which, contrary to the metaphor of hybridity, does not suppose purity and closure. So it means that culture is adaptive, answering contextual needs, and pluralistic, even universal. It manifests itself and requires the presence of at least a third party. And as a reminder, we have to keep in mind the dangers of the quest of the origins, which lead to essentialism, exclusion, and extreme ideologies. In Europe, we are still traumatized by of course, the Nazi history. They were looking for the pure human race and would kill everyone else. So this is a kind of essentialism that is quite dangerous, and that open theories of cultures are trying to avoid nowadays. Another thing is that the category of culture is highly political and can carry strong values and interests. Can I have the next slide, please? I will go back to my core research, which is wayang golek, a traditional puppet theater present in West Java in Indonesia, to illustrate what I mean by the fact that culture is a political category. Wayang golek is wayang golek. It exists approximately since the 15th century and is a kind of derivation, or we should say a branchement, born from wayang kulit, which is a traditional shadow puppet theater you find mainly in Central Java and Bali also. In the 19th century, with the Orientalist theories in Indonesia and the rise of nationalism at the beginning of the 20th century, new language categories entered in Indonesia, such as budaya, which means culture, seni, arts, tradisi, tradition, ritual, ritual. All these categories became political categories, means of domestication, as so-called by Jan Pemberton, of the elite, which means that they had the effect to turn practices into objects or objectification, and also open the way to politicization and academic studies. I talk about the domestication of the elite because at the time of the colonization, Javanese elites were deprived from economical and military powers, and they actually invested a new sphere of power. There was a cultural one. They became license, they became standardization powers for all the arts. So this is why it became a way of accepting their new status as colonized. From 1945, after the independence of the country, there were many efforts to control wayang golek by means of censor, propaganda, normalization, and that was within the program the interests of the shaping of national identity and culture within the frame of Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. Ethnic identities were represented as juxtaposed with political or administrative circumscriptions, that means provinces. I give you an example. For example, West Java would be Sundanese, although there are not only Sundanese people in West Java. You have people from Cirebon who have distinct culture, and so on. All this within the configuration of the Indonesian Republic. Since the 2000s, democratization and decentralization is at stake, and we can observe a strong revival of local identities, some might say indigenous identities, and also the introduction of the heritage, warisan in Indonesian concept, brought by the programs by the Unesco. So what I mean here is that by considering wayang golek or categorizing it as seni, budaya, tradisi, warisan, and ultimately as pagelaran, which means performance, actually all these categories are only covering part of the problem, of the issue. Wayang golek is not only arts. Wayang golek is about communication. Wayang golek is about economic activities as well. Wayang golek is about shaping the community. It's not only culture, it's not only tradition. But in giving those names, it allows us to talk about an object that also can become a product. And this is open to cultural and economic capitalization with the giving of value. For example, heritage has an economic value now, since you can export it, for example, or invite people to witness it. It also makes things more controllable and exploitable, and it also opens to further developments, including within the creative industry and creation. Next slide. What about language? Language, of course, is part of the culture. It's an expression medium. It is world shaping. We shape the world with our words, with the way we construct our language. It is also shaping and carrier of social and cultural identity. Sundanese people, for example, refer themselves as Sundanese because they speak Sundanese, not only because of this, but this is a big part of it. Language is also carrying aesthetics. We think about literature, we think about poetry, we think about songs, so aesthetics. But it is also carrying political values, as every language is included inside power relationships. I will talk here about hierarchy and diglossia relationship. Diglossia relationship is when you have a language dominating another in the speech. For example, I get back to my Sundanese example. Sundanese is in a situation of diglossia compared to Indonesian language that is dominating in the field of media, in the field of education, and so on. Although Indonesia also has it, but still it is carrying political relationship. Languages are exactly like culture, prone to adaptation, so they don't remain in the same shape from the beginning until the end. They adapt every day. And scripts here come as embodiment, materialization, and development of the spoken language, and sometimes become a language themselves, especially if you think about digital languages. Next slide, please. So now what's the relationship between indigenous people and anthropology? Because this is the legitimation of me being here today. Indigenous, natives, aboriginals were the fantasy and the legitimation for emerging anthropology in the 19th century. It was done in a context of discrimination and essentialization. It was done in a context of domination, which means that basically you had the Western anthropologists who would go to the colonies or even the colonies of other countries to study about white people over there, different people over there. So it was discriminating those people as radically different, sometimes even as non-human, like primitive people, they're not human, and so on. And the distance in time and space was the guarantee for scientific objectivity. I insist, I'm here talking about anthropology in the 19th century. Things have changed a lot, fortunately. But we see a new rise of indigenous concerns right now in the 2000s as a consequence of globalization. Globalization has a two side effect. First, we have indeed the risk or the trend to homogenization of the global sphere. So everyone sees the same movies. Everyone sees Hollywood or Bollywood movies. Everyone can eat at McD. Anyone can do things that are similar all around the world. However, This is also fostering a crystallization, or coming back to local identities, as they are thought to be a remedy for globalization, if globalization is thought as a threat, or it is the way of people to position themselves within this global context. In 2007, we have the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. After 20 years of negotiation, after an initial report outlining the oppression, marginalization, and exploitation suffered by indigenous people. So here is the definition of indigenous people as proposed by the United Nations in 1982. Indigenous communities, people, and nations are those that, having a historical continuity with pre-invasion and pre-colonial societies that develop on their territories, consider themselves distinct from other sectors of the society, now prevailing in those territories or part of them. They form at present non-dominant sectors of society and are determined to preserve, develop, and transmit to future generations their ancestral territories and their ethnic identities as the basic of their continued existence as peoples in accordance with their own cultural patterns, social institutions, and legal systems. And I should add here and languages. So now the question is this kind of declaration only fixing history, or can it also become a tool for new discrimination and cleavage? It's an open question. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about challenges. At present, we have a society building an intercultural communication that is going very fast. Next slide, please. And we have to consider the cyber-physical reality. It's not only for our everyday life, it's also a very drastic change, also for scientific disciplines such as anthropology. What is the cyber-physical reality or system? It is the close interaction and mutual influence between online and offline reality, thus creating a complex reality in which actors move and act on a regular basis. Within the spiritual networks, we have the possibility to be present in many contexts simultaneously at the same time, beyond physical presence, which is radically different from past technology, where you can only be in one context at the same time. This generalized access to the digital proposes an obvious globalization, and we can all access the same sources if we want, and we can all connect at the same time if we want to. And also concrete links between different levels of action and decision, and thus linking local and global action very concretely. Next slide, please. But still, it raises many questions. While the ideal may be the access for everyone, equal and free access and representation online, however, what can we see? What can we observe? We can see that the involvement in the cyber-physical reality implies the presence of interfaces. And the question is, who can really master them? So it raises the question of access and digital literacy, which is not the same and is not equal for everyone. Second, we still observe many inequalities, like domination, diglossia on the web, for example. I mean, English is prevailing, and this is an euphemism to say it. I mean, English is just the language in the net right now. I guess it's followed close by Chinese or other Mandarin or other languages, but English is very, very dominating here. And it is experimented every day. And the last question is, who are indigenous people in this cyber-physical reality? Who are the natives? Because we can have a different category. In the offline reality, then we have people linked to territorial spaces and history. But what happens if we ask this question on this new cyber-physical reality? The question is open, of course. Next slide, please. So what's happening nowadays for local or indigenous cultures in the new reality? So my predecessor, Ilham, already gave a kind of an overlook and saying that local communities now tend to grab this opportunity to exist on the cyber-physical reality. Let's see a little bit deeper right now. First, being included in this reality means that you enter the competition on the global market, since actually you're not always a minority when you enter the cyber-physical reality, the cyber part of it. You have a value shift from presentation to representation. Let me give you an example. If you use a language with your friends, with an everyday interaction, so you talk with your friend, let's say in Indonesian, and then you're presenting yourself. You don't need to say, "Oh, I'm talking Indonesian with you." You just talk. This is what I call presentation. Then someone else comes. This person doesn't speak Indonesian. So you will need to know and understand that you speak Indonesian, and then you shift to representation. You are going to represent yourself as. So this is a shift that is happening for everyone coming on the way. It is also about adaptation and innovation, of course, because you don't behave exactly the same here face-to-face or online. The question is that cyber reality bringing the end of essentialization, or is it a new start for identity crystallization? Is it a way to open to the others or to claim a closed identity? Because as we said earlier, it's about naturally, cultures and languages are open, they're always adapting, but people tend to consider them as fixed and take a tea time, the right moment to say, this is my culture now, and to present it as fixed, although it is not, of course. Finally, cyber-physical reality is a new space for culture. And since the COVID-19 pandemic, it became actually almost the only space for culture. As, for example, going back to my core example, wayang golek cannot be performed. You have thousands of people coming to watch, you cannot perform during the pandemic. So what do people do? They propose online performances. And here you have an example of Central Javanese Dalang Kipurbo Asmoro presenting a virtual performance that is translated in 4 languages, English, let me remind you, English, Indonesian, Japanese, and French. And the other example here is from Kidalang dan Sunan Laksonaria, proposing a wayang golek virtual wayang golek performance at the initiative of political party, PKB. Everything online. And this is the only thing they can do now in this field. So again, in 1000, we can observe a revival of local culture, languages, and identities that is, again, strongly connected to the process of decentralization at stake in Indonesia since the beginning of the 2000s. Next slide, please. So now, back to the future. How do we call the future? How do we envision it? Sure, we have to think about sustainability, including cultural and environmental stewardship. Sorry. Next slide. So what about digitalization? Bailam gave an overview about languages and is much more specialist than I am in this field. But what for? First, digitalization can allow to exist, or at least bring the acknowledgement in the cyber-physical reality. Being only in the physical reality means that you don't exist in a big part of what is now cyber-physical reality, that is our reality right now. Second, it is how we present and represent ourselves. It allows to introduce, for example, languages or cultures to people who don't know them. If I talk about Sudanese cultures, about Sudanese culture 5 years ago in France, no one knows about it. Now, if I talk about it, people can have much more access to what it is, and they can watch wayang golek online, for example. It is also about preservation by digitalizing, for example, ancient scripts or performances. You preserve, you archive things, so it's important. The question is, with this digitalization, you need to standardize. For example, if you want to bring ancient scripts into digitalization, then you have to standardize them. So is it going to be new fixation? It's a question. But also, it is also a fantastic adaptation medium. It is the extension of the cultural and the linguistic space. And all these sources then become resources for the apprehension of new interaction, for adaptation and exchange, and also for innovation and creation in various domains, including information technologies. Because who knows, maybe the scripts can be used for different purposes. You can have new creations and you can have new technological creations as well. Next slide, please. And so the final thoughts will be about the question about the benefits for the local communities. As it was presented by Ilham, you have indeed a rise of cultural and identity awareness that is happening here, not only in Indonesia, but also all over the world. So local communities are grasping, are taking the opportunity to exist and to be acknowledged in the cyber-physical reality. But this has to remain the case, because if not these communities or these heritage holders who are moving, can it become a new tool for control and exploitation? I don't know, by governments, by companies, you never know. So what is important to keep in mind is values like freedom of expression, democracy, representation, community and self-image, that is controlled by themselves. And of course, always sustainability. So everything about a community-based process. And I think I will stop here because my time is over. I would like to thank you all for this attention. I hope these questions might be useful for each one of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibu Sarah, for your presentation. Give applause for Ibu Sarah. Wow, such a great presentation. Now we are going to proceed to Bapak Dr. Richard Menko to present his material. Please, Bapak Richard, time is yours.
Good morning, distinguished ladies, gentlemen. It's an honor for me to be a part of this forum. So my presentation is rather broad to go into the main objective of all of these activities. Slide, please. Or should I share screen or?
Yes, bro. If you have the slide, yes.
Okay. Is it already there?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me go to full screen. Okay. My presentation is rather broad, touching more on the main objective of these activities. So first of all, Indonesia is a tropical archipelago, more than 10,000 islands. What does it mean actually? It means that our population, our community is rather isolated in those islands. The interaction is different with in the mainland. So this makes that the previous culture, previous habit, scripture, it becomes different from one region to the other region. Indonesia, we have now the Bahasa Indonesia. It was used since it was introduced by the Dutch actually. But at that time is Bahasa Melayu, they call it, because it's a similar language with the Malaysian side there. Now we know it as Malaysia. We call it Melayu in the previous era. Uncovering the hidden past. Yeah. I'm always curious about the past of Indonesia. There are a number of evidence that we have a very long past history. As all of us know about the Temple of Borobudur, that is built around 800 to 1200, in the year of 800 to 1200. Then we have also that footprints here in Borneo, Kalimantan. It is believed that is in year 400 something. And then 10 years ago, they have found a temple there in south of West Java called Gunung Padang Temple. It is believed that it was from the Megalithic era, so thousands of years ago. And then if we go to the map of DNA, it is written in the map of one of the DNA is originated in the eastern island of Flores. They call it the DNA of Homo sapiens fluorescens. Yeah. So I believe there was a population and culture and of course languages, scripts that was already used since long time ago. Even if you go to the geological domain, they have evidence that 73,000 years BC, so it is 75,000 years ago, something. There was a mountain, they call it Mountain Toba, was erupted. It was a very big eruption. It's a mega volcano in North Sumatra, and that eruption now creates the Lake Toba. And since we know that this is a tropical area with a fertile soil, so I believe that population community exists already for a long time here in this region. And this makes very interesting for digging new evidence for that. As Pa Ilham, Busara already have mentioned about the script, I'm not a scripture expert, so I know only from general literatures publications that we have a number of scriptures, ancient scriptures. And as I understand, as I know, that these are the last ones that is still possible to conserve. Many of them already perished because no one knows, there's no one left how to pronounce it and what are the meanings of those scripts, even though we have those scripts here. So it's very interesting, I mean, to dig on the past of Indonesia, including the scripture. I'm always curious how they built the temple of Borobudur. How at that time they can define 90 degrees angle. I'm sure how to build a temple such as Borobudur, they need a definition of orthogonalism, 90 degrees angle. They need to define symmetry, and the symmetry, how to make it symmetry. So all of those things, I think, is very important to dig. And also for the social and community life, how do they cope with earthquakes? And how do they communicate each other? All of those things I think we need to dig not only to understand the history, but I'm sure it will give us a benefit to face the future. Thanks for us today that Pandi have an initiative to digitalize all of this script. I believe it creates a great help for the community to do further research on the ancient scripture. And I believe that this library can now be conserved in storage, accessible through the network, and then create a more wider support. And this wider support is really important because it will, like a snowball, it will create bigger and bigger research in this area, and I'm sure we can get more information for the future. And this future, it can be anything. It can be anything. For example, I'm sure the film industries can have new domains of creating more new titles of films, the ancient life in this region, for example. Or our textile industry, I'm sure they get an idea for batik, new patterns of batik to use all of those ancient scripture or ancient evidence. So that will create new domains in the future, and that's why we need a wider support. And thanks to Pandi initiative for doing it. And it is consuming. Let us be aware it's time consuming. We cannot discuss it today and hope next year is solved. It will take years, decades maybe, to continuously dig and try to find what can we benefit for the future. Yeah. And again, to do that, I really hope this forum and Pandi can enclose all of the parties needed to work together for this effort. At this stage, it's only digitizing maybe and only to build a library, maybe the non-Latin characters to make it publicly available. But I believe in the long run, it will open new opportunities. And that is the basic objective that I can understand from this forum. And I'm very glad that this forum is there with the help of Pandi, and then let us together create a bigger support from the government, from the private sectors, and from all of the experts in this field. Thank you very much, and I believe, as Eleanor Roosevelt has said, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their trees. So let us aim for a healthy and bigger forum. Thank you.
Okay, give applause for Dr. Richard. That's very wonderful presentation, yeah? Okay, we will be continuing to the next presenter, to Bapak Cokorde Rai. Please, time is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Sonia. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Cokorda Pramata. Could you please load the slide, please? Anyone? Load the slide. So basically, the topic that I will bring today is about digital humanities and digital heritage. So in the beginning, we hear from Mr. Ilham and Ibu Sarah from the point of the linguistic and cultural heritage. While when we talk about digital humanities and digital heritage is basically the combination between an IT and the language or the culture. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right. So this is an interesting one. So people in Indonesia knows me not as a researcher or not as a professor, in the university, but they know me as a national basketball player. So it's a kind of unique thing. But basically, I'm from Udayana University of Bali, and then I received a PhD from Sydney University. My topic is about digital heritage. Next, please. Next slide, please. So this is the research area that I'm interested in, basically the combination between the culture and an IT. Next slide, please. So in the beginning, Ms. Sarah already mentioned about what is cultural heritage, and Mr. Ilham also mentioned about that. So this is the gray area between the IT area and the culture area. I understand in the beginning of my PhD thing, everyone questioning about this area, because this area is in the middle between the IT perspective and the cultural perspective. And this is what is digital humanities, I mentioned before, is basically the combination between the technology and humanities, where the cultural heritage is basically an aspect of past experience, but we still continue today. Next slide, please. So we should look at how UNESCO classified the cultural heritage before we talk about other things. So basically, UNESCO classified the cultural heritage into two aspects. The first one is the tangible aspect. It's become the movable and immovable, and the intangible aspect. Most cases in Bali, we cannot separate them, right? Because when we talk about intangible, it's basically we talk about cultural practices. Especially in Bali, anything is tangible. It's always the intangible aspect over there. So we cannot really clearly differentiate between the tangible aspect and intangible aspect in Bali. Next slide, please. So when we talk about cultural heritage, it is basically an enormous mess of interrelated fact and concept. You probably ask why we talk about this instead of talk about the IT, right? So in order to computer to understand about the culture or the heritage, we as a developer, we need to understand first, right? So we cannot just pull everything from the real world and then put into the computer-based system. No, that doesn't make any sense. And that's the reason why many of the applications available today, no one uses it. And the interesting part, UNESCO already mentioned that the cultural practices is something that very fragile, because we understand that it's not written. We just practice it. Different people will practice it different thing. Next slide, please. All right, so when we talk about Balinese culture, I think it's applied to any culture in Indonesia. So what we have in here is we have poorly documentation. Yeah. Basically, everything is largely tacit. What I try to say in here is not written. So we know the thing is from our father, we know the thing from our grandfather, and it's basically fragmented. What I try to say is fragmented. So if you ask one person, they don't know the whole thing. They will ask, why don't you ask this person? Another part of the understanding. And then that person also refers to other things. And most of the information or the knowledge is basically rooted in the Balinese community. Right? So when we try to grab the information, try to grab the knowledge from Balinese culture, it's quite challenging. It's not just it's not like what happened in the museum in the developed country where all the information is available over there. If you go to the museum here in Bali, what you find? One piece of paper mentioned about the history of, let's say, Klungkung Kingdom. That's it. No more. So how can we understand about that if there's no written of information over there? That's also the the case that we need to understand before put them into the digital form. Next slide, please. This. So basically in here supposed to be a picture, but I'm afraid that it's not available. When we talk about bringing the culture into the domain of IT or a digital form, in my experience, we should look at Balinese. That's also applied. Right? So when we try to grab the information, the knowledge, bring it to the digital form, then we should classify that one. And another philosophy that we have in Bali is called Desa Kala Patra. What this means is based on space, location, based on time, basically today or in the future, in the past, and based on the circumstances. So if you go to Bali, different places, different villages, they practices a different thing. Have we, as a Balinese, ever complained about that? No, because we always said it based on Desa Kala Patra. And the reason why it's happened that way is because the way that we transfer our knowledge in Bali is basically from tacit to tacit. I remember in the past, when I tried to understand something in the ceremony, I asked my dad, "Dad, why people doing this? Why people doing that?" His answer is very simple. Yeah. Just sit here, watch them, and you understand. Okay? That's or in Bali, we usually say, "Nak mula keto." I think it's already been there from a long time ago. Don't questioning it. So I try to understand why people saying that before bringing it to the digital form. Then we understand that the way they transfer that knowledge in that way. All right, so when we talk about Bali and Balinese language, in Bali we have around 5 million people living in this island. And in Bali we practices 3 different level hierarchy of Balinese. So when we talk about those with the lower case, then we use different language. When we talk about those with the same case, then we use different language. And we talk about those come from higher case, we also use a different language. So these 3 languages is completely different. Okay? And now in 2013, there's a study mentioned about less than 50% Balinese people can speak Balinese. That's bring the question, why? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so before go to the Balinese script, so talk about the reason why people happen not to using a Balinese language is because of that 3 hierarchy. And because the introduce of Bahasa Indonesia. I'm not saying Bahasa Indonesia is bad for the Balinese, but people more comfort because in Bahasa Indonesia is very flat. You not think about you have come from the high case, you come from the lower case, nobody care. It's just flat. So people feel, okay, why don't we use the Bahasa Indonesia? And I remember, if I'm not mistaken, around 2013 or 2014, the Bahasa Bali or Balinese language is take off from the curriculum. So that make everyone happy, especially the student. I remember when I was a kid, the thing that I am afraid if I go to school, first math, second physics. If you ask people in Bali today, what is the frightening subject that you have in the school? Everyone, almost 100% of them will say Balinese. The question is why? Yeah? This is the experience that I have with my kids. He has 3 languages learned in the school. First of all, Bahasa. Second of all, Javanese. The third one is Balinese. He always said, Balinese is the hardest one. And I said, why? Because every time I try to search the internet, there's nothing available over there. especially this COVID era, everyone pushed to go to the internet to search the material over there. But unfortunately, not many resources available over there. Okay, that's when we talk about Balinese language. When we talk about Balinese script, it's also worse, right? Balinese language is basically 1 out of 18, if I'm not mistaken. The recent study mentioned about that. Balinese language is written on the top of the palm leaf, written from left to the right, and no space between words. And also, they have 18 syllable, 10 vowel, and 10 numbers. It is script into 185 characters. How difficult is that? Okay, we have the Latin. It's not that difficult. It's easy. I mean, we can put everything in one pages, and then we can see all of it. What about Balinese script? And this script is basically, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's basically you use the script depend on what you written, what you write. Are you write about the God? Are you write about the human? Are you write about the environment? So that's the understanding that we should understand before bringing them into the digital form. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, the challenge that we have is because the introduction of the Bahasa Indonesia is basically free case, flat, Latin alphabet. We talk about 185 script into the Latin script, which is not too many. And the question is, should we standardize that or not? Okay, but the opportunity that we have in here, the government just issued the regulation in 2018 and 2020. I believe at the beginning, me myself also hate that one, yeah, because it's changing the way that we're doing. It's like today I'm wearing the Balinese clothes. At the beginning, I hate that. You know, it's just not simple. But then I understand that what the government wants is basically would like to bring our identity. Okay, and the opportunity that we have, we discussed earlier, is basically the use of IT. Okay? When you ask people to write a Balinese script in the piece of paper, in the top of the palm leaf, for them, so what next? That's not cool. But if for them is able to write in the Facebook wall, able to write on the top of Instagram, and the top of the WhatsApp, they will say, cool, I would like to use that. Okay? And as I mentioned earlier, the opportunity that we have, especially from the IT domain, when we talk about security, the less people know is the more secure. Okay? That means if we look at the Balinese script, if less people know, especially if only Balinese knows, and we build the application, I don't know, we haven't tried this research yet, but I think it's bring a good opportunity to do research to make it secure. For instance, if you go to ATM, your password is basically Balinese script. Anyone knows outside the Balinese people? No, right? So it's a good opportunity. So if we try to bring that cultural part into the digital form, many things that we can expand it, we can develop on it. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, it's really jump into one slide to another. Okay, so next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so this is, I'm sorry, because the slide is jumped from one slide to another. I haven't checked it in the beginning. So the thing that I would like to express in here is basically how can we bring the Balinese script into the digital form. So basically there's a Unicode, it's basically standardized thing that we can put into the computer-based system, which is they can understand that. So anyone in the back, could you please just move forward the slide, then I will tell you when to stop. Next. Next slide. Next slide. Oh. So basically, there's a lot of things I meant to explain to show you in the slide, but unfortunately, there's not many things that I can show you. I mean, the people in here not really showing the right presentation. So what I try to say in here is basically we develop tools, tools for those who'd like to use a Balinese script into a computer-based system. We create a keyboard. Yeah, we create a keyboard so that whenever people would like to write a Balinese script, say they can easily write that on the top of the computer. So the question is, why should we bring everything in the digital form? So when we have everything in the digital form, then computer can manipulate everything that we have over there. Okay, so the thing is, before we bring it into the digital form, of course, we need to understand the concept of the culture that we would like to bring into the digital form. I think that the end of my presentation. Thank you so, very much. I'm so sorry about the technical problem that we have in here.
Thank you very much. Give applause for Dr. Cho. Yay. We will have a keyboard on Balinese script. Hooray. Okay, so we are going to proceed to the next presenter, Bapak Dr. Ono Purbo. Please present the material. Yeah, time is yours, Bapak.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much, everyone here. First, I like to share my screen. Okay. I like to say hello to my teacher, Pak Richard Mengko. He is my teacher actually since my undergrad. Nice to see you, still kicking and still healthy. Okay.
Pagi Pak Ono.
Pagi Pak Richard. Okay. So I will talk in English, but my presentation is about the possibility to make a compiler for indigenous language. So we use indigenous character and build a compiler for that. Okay. This is. So thank you very much for Pandi. Actually, this idea is coming from a coffee shop discussion with Pak Heru Nugroho, and we talk about exactly the same as Pak Chokorda mentioned about the security. If we want to, my background is more on internet and security and stuff like that. So having in security area, if we want to make it a system secure, we have to make sure nobody can read the script. So if we can use indigenous font, then we will be secure, as Pak Chokorda mentioned. So the idea is, how can we build a compiler using indigenous font? Okay. I'm not an expert in language. I'm not an expert in compiler. This is a learning process notes of the learning process. If we try to decode or encode, I hope my slide is clear enough. I know many people. Oh, okay, my slide is clear enough. Okay. Okay, if we want to decode and encode an indigenous language, the problem is human use text, the computer speaks bytes. That's the problem. So we need a table to map between text and bytes. It is done by unicode.org. So we have to thank unicode.org. The problem is the table is not distributedly to many operating systems. So some of the font will show up as tofu, as tahu. So in Indonesian language is tahu, in English is tofu. I'll show you what the tofu looks like. So this is unicode.org. We can check Javanese Unicode chart. We can download from unicode.org, or you can search the Google Javanese Unicode, and we find the table like this. We keep in mind the number is 0A9 something. That's Javanese, or 1A9 something. That's Javanese. That's the number of the Javanese code. And this one is Sundanese. 01B something is Sundanese. Okay. And this one is Batak script. 01B something. BC, BD, BE, BF. That's Batak. And then how to use the Unicode? Then I'm facing a problem. That's how the problem showed up. How to use the Unicode is easy for Latin character or Greek character. Okay, this is the Greek character. You can download the Greek character Unicode. We can use Python in interpreter, and we can find the table 03B2, 03B2, something here is beta, and we can see beta here. Just type it like this. 00, if we want more bytes, 00003A3. 03A3 is Sigma like this, and we can find Sigma here. Okay, so Sigma, we can find Sigma. This is a Python interpreter. So we can see it is not a tahu, it's not a tofu. The problem with Javanese, then we find tofu like this. Because the problem is, so when I try, when I experiment, I found, okay, yes, Unicode has the table like this, but the font is not built into the operating system yet. We need to download, as Pak Ilham mentioned, we need to download the character from the internet. Okay, so we need to download. Hopefully, if we can make a compiler, so only those who are able to read the character can understand the coding, except Busara, of course, because Busara can read these things. So we have a problem with Busara. This is Balinese in Python, same thing. Okay. So I need to download, this is the coding, is something like this, for example, coding in Python. This is Unicode, 0x1b91 is Unicode. I can show you how it looks like. But I have installed the Google No More Tofu character. It's called Google Noto or No More Tofu character. Let me see. Okay, let me make it bigger so you guys can read better here. Okay, Python 3. Okay. Okay, I paste the code here. Okay, you can see it show the character here. Latin, Greek, Javanese, Balinese, Sundanese, Batak. Okay, so it works. On my computer, of course, it works because I already installed the Google No More Tofu character. If I uninstall the No More Tofu character, it's gone. So, to be honest, our effort is how to convince the operating system developer, how to convince Android, how to convince browser to install the No More Tofu character into their system, so people can build these things. To have those, maybe I'll continue my presentation before. So this is the result. So if I'm not installing the No More Tofu character, I will get tofu like this. So a square tofu. Let me go to the compiler. Compiler is computer software that transforms source language into target language. Target language is normally machine language. The source code normally is higher level programming language, C, C++, Objective-C, Java, Fortran, and so on, and translate into assembly language that run by the machine. Okay, so its compiler normally it has several process in it. It has front end, middle end, and also translator into machine code here at the back end. Okay, this is the example for C compiler. Basically, it has parser, generalizer, glimfire, and so on, and it generates the assembly program. The interesting thing is people already make the framework for the compiler. One of the open source framework from compiler is LLVM. So we can build compiler using LLVM. It's open source, it's free. We can use C language and we can use any other language, including using local indigenous font. And then we can compile and we can translate into Intel, ARM, or other machine language that understand. So the compiler framework is there. We need to modify, make the computer or operating system understand the indigenous font, and then compile it, and then machine will understand. So the major problem is not in the compiler itself. The major problem is how computer understand the local indigenous language. That's the major problem. So this is basically the compiler, the steps in the compiler. I will not go through this because it's very technical. This is the example of our problem right now. If we browse the Wikipedia for Unicode chart of Balinese, it's tofu. It's not a Balinese, it's tofu. It's again Javanese, tofu. Again Batak, tofu. Again Sudanese, tofu. So all tofu. So this is our, what's that? This is our task, maybe. Our higher task to work together. Of course, Pak Cokorda has been working on it. Maybe Pak Ilham, Pak Richard have been, many people, the community has been working on it. Some people of the language center of the Ministry of Education has been working on it to work hard, but we need to work together, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Research, the Ministry of Perdagangan. We need to invest on Unicode data, so it will include it into the operating system. I really hope we can build application for students to learn the local indigenous language, so people in the world can see, okay, this character is actually used by the Indonesian people. People actually using this character, so we need to include the character into the operating system. Otherwise, people will be having difficulty to learn the local indigenous character. This is not a single organization task. Thank you very much for Pandi for having this conference, but this actually the homework for many of us, include especially the government, to move back to the operating system developer, back to the browser developer, to include the Unicode into their system. Otherwise, all of us will be in trouble. With that, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity. I hope I can give some lights. This is actually my complaint. When we build this thing, this is my complaint. I hope my complaint is not too strong enough. Thank you very much. I give it back to the monitor. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, such a strong presentation. Give applause for Dr. Ono Wepurbo. Thank you, Pak Ono. Okay, now we have the last but not least, our professor is here, Yudo Giri Sucahyo, to give the presentation. Please, time is yours.
Thank you, Sonia. Good day, everyone. So glad to be back in Bali. But first, let me say hello to my guru, Pak Richard Mengko, who always been together for a long time. Thank you, Pak Guru, and also Kang Ono, to whom that I still owe something to him. And then Kang Ilham, our expert on the ancient script, and also Dr. Cokorda, who has explained a lot about how should we connect with the Hindu culture or Bali culture related to this indigenous languages and character in the Industry 4.0 era, and also to Mas Sarah, thank you to participate. Now, I'm from Pandi, and since 2 years ago, since 2019, we have our national program, entitled Connecting Indonesia Through Ancient Script Digitalization, or if we translate it to Indonesia, merajut Indonesia melalui digitalisasi aksara Nusantara, and we have we call it MIMDAN. Now, what is Pandi? Pandi is actually a non-profit organization. We are actually the registry for .id. .id is our domain name for indicating Indonesia, and we are responsible to manage the operational and the maintenance of the domain name system. Next slide, please. And you might ask us, why Pandi is so concerned about the ancient script digitalization? And the idea is actually simple. We know that we have Bahasa Indonesia, and Bahasa Indonesia is considered as our national language, but we also rich of culture, and we have more than 700 languages, and we have identified among more than 30 of those languages, they have scripts, and we want to make the internet content in Indonesia is not only Bahasa Indonesia, but also including content in our ancient script. So in the future, we will have more content in Balinese character, we will have more content on Javanese character, and Sundanese character, and so on and so on. And Kang Ilham and also Kang Dadan works very hard for that, together with Pandi's team, mentored by Pak Heru Nugroho, which is mentioned by Pak Ono. Okay, so we can see that in the digital world, if you are not there, then you are actually not exist. So it is also applied to language. If you are not present in the digital world, then that language is considered not exist. So as long as Balinese character, as long as Balinese language is not there on the internet, then in the digital world, it is considered it is not there. And if it is like that, we can see that millennials now, they always use gadgets every day. So if we don't preserve it, then in the future, it will be gone. And we don't want it to happen, okay? And Bali is actually one of the prominent region in Indonesia, because the government has come up with their own local government regulation, number 1/2018, which is actually because of that, the moment you enter Bali airport, then you can see the Bali character there. And if you travel along Bali, then you will see that so many public buildings here also put their name, the name of the building in Bali character, which is good, so good. And, but still, as Dr. Chogoda mentioned, it is surprising that less than 30% can speak Balinese language. Okay, so we need to do something for that, because actually with the advancements of technological development, actually we can also make those culture being digitalization, so that in that case, we can present the culture as actually in the digital world. Okay, next slide. Now, next slide, please. So there are so many things we can do with the digital technology. One example is actually we can have a language map, mapping all the regional language or the regional language or local languages in Indonesia. Now, we also need to consider that not all languages in Indonesia, not all ancient scripts in Indonesia is actually being digitized. So we need to make difference between digitization and digitalization. Bali character is already digitized. So the next thing that we need to do is how to make digitalization of the Balinese character. But we still have so many characters, it's not being digitized, so it's not there. So in that case, we need to bring those characters, those scripts to digital world first before we can do digitalization on that language. So by using that, we can present all those languages with the ancient scripts on the internet page, and we can build, once it is in the internet, you can also check our website, merajutindonesia.id. We just launched what we call the multi-scripts keyboard. So you can write something in Bali, and then you can transliterate it to Java. You can write something on Java, and then you can transliterate it to Sunda. And we have a dream that someday, those futures, it's going to be, we will put we will add more characters, more scripts. By doing that, even if, let's say, Dr. Chokorda writes something in Bali, I do hope that in the future I can understand what it means. And then I do hope that in the future I can translate it to Javanese character using Hono Choroko, and then send it to my friends that can understand the Hono Choroko or Javanese language. It is our dream, and soon we will launch the website. It's already there, the prototype, so you can check also merajutindonesia.id. Okay, next slide. So this is what will happen. Nowadays, we still have .id. But we want to have .something, which is actually, at the end of it, it could be Bali character, it could be Java character, and so on. And we have a prospect for more than 30 scripts currently identified in Indonesia. So in that case, the content of the internet in Indonesia will be flourished. It's not only dominated by Indonesian language, it's not only dominated by A, B, C, D, E, but also using other characters, other local characters in Indonesia. So, next. So this is the current map of the IDN. IDN stands for Internationalized Domain Name. So we can see that several countries, they have already got IDN. And you can see our neighbor, Malaysia, they have already got what they call Arabic Jawi. And we can see Singapore, they have already got IDN on Chinese script and also in India's script. Now it is so sad that our country, who has so many cultures, who has so many scripts, who has so many languages, still none of it. We still do not have the IDN. Have we tried to register it? Yes, we did. At the beginning of this year, but it is still being rejected by ICANN. Why? Simple, because the usage of the Bali character, the usage of Java character, it is actually not still being used intensively by the community. So this is something that we need to do. So once the language is actually being recognized as the official regional language, once the language is already being standardized and presented in Unicode, once the language is actually, the status of the language in the Unicode is already used by the community, then ICANN can do something. So it is a long journey, my friend, and we need to work together, not only Pandi cannot do it alone. If you want to travel fast, you can travel alone, but if you want to travel for a long journey, then we need to do it together. Not only Pandi, but also academics. This morning we have an event with the Universitas Udayana related to Balinese Script until tomorrow, working on the Bali script standardization. We also have worked with community from Java language, Sunda language, and also led by Kang Ilham and also Kang Dadan, together with our Mimdam team. And we also need the help from the government, and the government of Bali has already showed their seriousness and on the Balinese language. And also we need help from our friend from media and also from the industry. Industry will not be there as long as we don't have the standardization on those characters, which is why the standardization, and this is why we need to work together with the National Standardization Agency. Once it is there, then we can move forward for the character to be adopted by the industry, and then we can have so many gadgets, so many tools using that standardization on the language or the characters. Next slide. So this is the current IDN that in the world so far, and Indonesia is still not there. And then let's work together to put Indonesia on the map. Next slide. So I have already mentioned about this. So it is still a long journey. We need to work together, the Ministry of ICT, we need to work together with the Ministry of Education and Culture, Research and Technology. We need to work together with the National Standardization Agency, together with the community, and then together with Pandi and with media and so on. Then that's the steps to make it IDN. It's a long way, and we have started with the standardization. We have already put it and then submitted to National Standardization Agency, and it is still under process. Once it is adopted by ISO, once it is adopted by Unicode, and then we can use, it will be adopted by browser, etc., and then we can have the IDN. Next slide. So currently, we have already got several languages or several scripts already being registered in Unicode. We can see there Bali, Batak, Bugis, and then Java, Makassar, Rejang, Sunda, and so on. Okay. Unfortunately, although those script is already there, but the status of those scripts is actually not like Laos language. It is not like Chinese language. It is not like Indian script, where actually their government recognized that script as the official regional language. Which is why we need to put the regional language being adopted or being recognized or being officially recognized. So by doing that, then we can claim to the ICANN that it is already recognized by our country. As long as it is still not there, then it is so hard to make it to IDN and so on. And then we have a danger that in the future our culture will be gone. Next slide. And Pandi has already a member of the Unicode of the ISO, and we have already worked together with the National Standardization Agency or BSN to make it SNI, Standard National Indonesia, Indonesian National Standard. So by doing that, then we can prove to ICANN, this is not just a language that being used by ceremony, for the ceremony. This is not the language that's just being used in the formal education, but this is actually the language that's used by community. And I cannot do it alone, which is why we asked Dr. Chokorda, so that in the future, not less than 30% Bali citizens can speak Bali language. Otherwise, it's going to be gone in the future, and we don't want that to happen. Next slide. So in the future, it's not only .id, but we have something in Javanese language, in Bugis, Sunda, Bali, Batak, Arabic, and Rejang, and so on. And it is a long journey. Next slide. So this is just the idea update. Next slide. We have already mapped the script map, current script map in Indonesia. And you can see that the blue one is actually the one that is already registered on Unicode. The red one is actually, we have already recognized the scripts, but it hasn't registered on the Unicode. And we still have, using the gray color, we still need to do something with all those languages. And by having this session, I would ask all of you to participate in this national program. Next slide. This is the map that being recognized by the Ministry of Culture and Education. Next slide. Okay, next slide. So this is so we can see here, these are actually the history of activities that we have done together with the government and also with the community. We have a competition on building the website using the local content, using their local character, using their local scripts. Next slide. We also facilitate meetings or regional meetings among the manuscripts expert, among the local language expert. Next slide. We also facilitate the community of Javanese language to have what they call Congress Aksara Jawa. So it is a national congress on Javanese character, and also symposium on the Sundanese character or Sundanese script. Next slide, we also have training and fellowship journal together with our friend for media. Next slide, and so many activities, FGD on the local scripts or ancient scripts. We have the revenue from managing the domain name. The revenue that we receive from the community, we need to give it back to community, and this is one of the activities. Other than managing the domain name server, which is actually our main priority as the registry of .id. But we want to have this also part of our activity, one of the priority that in the future we will have the content of the internet, not only in Bahasa Indonesia, but also in regional or local languages. Having said that, next slide, I would like to say thank you very much, Matur Suksma in Bali language. Back to moderator.
Okay, thank you. Give applause for Professor Yudo Giri Sucahyo. We have heard 6 presentations from 6 great presenters, and they are the expert in the field. And I believe that some of us have so many questions maybe in mind to ask about their presentation. Therefore, I would like to invite, due to limited time, we have only 20 minutes for Q&A, and I'm going to invite 3 questions from the floor. So if you have questions, please raise your hand and mention your name and institution and give your question briefly. Yeah. Okay, we have one over there. And then raise your hands if you want to ask. Pak Adnyana, you want to ask question? Okay. And this side. Okay, while waiting for another, so please committee give the microphone to. Yes, okay. Please mention your name and maybe institution. Thank you.
Check. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richmond Faithful. You can call me Richie. I'm from Universitas Terbuka. Thank you all the speakers for the materials. And I am actually, sorry, my heart beats so fast, I'm kind of nervous. I'm actually kind of interested in Dr. Chokorda's materials, even despite the technical problems. I guess, we can all understand the materials, like that was a very detailed and complex situations, yet are explained in a very simple way. Thank you, Dr. Chokro. Oh, I'm sorry, Chokoria. So we have the term Industry 4.0 in our sub-theme today, and as we all know, the revolution Industry 4.0, even the Society 5.0, are highly attached to businesses where technology had gotten into its peak like it is today, are mostly because startups today are combinations between businesses and technology. They combine technology and business. So are there like any opportunity for us youth to build such a digital business which can combine the websites using the indigenous languages, where we can combine not only technology and business, but also culture, mainly the indigenous language. And actually, there are 2 questions. Both are attached one to another. There will be any line that we shouldn't cross, since culture can cause many point of view, many interpretations, like, things like that. That's all for me. Thank you, I guess.
Okay, thank you so much for your questions. So those questions are addressed to Pak Chokorda, but if other speakers want to complete the answer, yeah, welcome. So we are going to invite another from this side. Please, committee. Yeah.
Selamat siang, terima kasih. Izinkan saya menyampaikan pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia, tapi nanti terserah mau dijawab dengan bahasa Inggris, saya juga dengarkan. Pertanyaan ini mungkin, saya nggak tahu siapa yang lebih depan jawab, apakah Prof. Giri atau Pak Co, atau mungkin juga narasumber yang lain. Ada hal yang menarik masalah alih.
Introduce your name, please.
Oh iya, sorry.
Yeah.
Nama saya Made Adnyana,
Yes.
dari Universitas PGRI Mahadewa, Indonesia. Ada hal yang menarik masalah alih digital ini ya, masalah bahasa daerah, karena kalau berbicara bahasa itu kan bukan hanya lambang ya, bukan hanya huruf, tetapi juga masalah bahasa. Nah ini sering yang barangkali menjadi kendala, saya kira bukan hanya di aksara Bali, tapi di Sunda maupun Jawa. Ada kata-kata tertentu yang jika misalnya dialihkan ke dalam bahasa itu menjadi nggak nyambung. Contoh misalnya kemarin saya lihat nama acara Digital Transformation in Southeast Asia itu misalnya. Mau dipakaikan aksara Bali dalam tanda kutip dipaksakan bisa. Tapi bahasa Bali itu misalnya tidak mengenal aksara H. Terus kemudian Southeast itu diterjemahkan jadi apa? Dicarikan jadi Southeast. Sehingga kalau dibaca ya mungkin agak aneh juga. Nah ini barangkali ada pemikiran nggak barangkali apakah dari Prof. Giri atau Pak Cho atau bagaimana mengatasi hal-hal seperti ini? Karena contoh misalnya ketika kita lihat di kantor pemerintahan atau di Bandara Ngurah Rai, yang diterjemahkan itu adalah ucapannya. Jadi misalnya Bandara Ngurah Rai, dicarikan aksara yang sesuai. Karena saya kira itu menarik, tetapi akhirnya ada beberapa aksara yang nggak ketemu gitu, Prof. Jadi misalnya Surat itu ya mau dicarikan ke dalam aksara cuma ana caraka data sawala nggak ketemu Surat itu, jadi dicarikan yang mirip. Kalau di eja jadinya aneh gitu. Dan mungkin ada pemikiran nggak gimana untuk mengatasi hal semacam ini. Mungkin itu aja. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Made Adnyana. Masih ada pertanyaan lagi? Jangan malu-malu ya, ini kesempatan yang luar biasa untuk bertanya kepada para expert di dunia Indigenous Languages and Technology ya. Baik, kalau belum ada, kita jawab dulu ya Pak Cho, silakan.
Okay, thank you Ms. Sonia, thank you Richie for the question and the comment. So your question is, when we talk about Industry 4.0, it's basically the combination between the business and technology. Your question is, can we build something as a startup related to the culture? Well, when we talk about business, if no one built anything yet, that means it's a good business. Agree? For instance, if you look around in around 2000 or something, when people start to sell the voucher of the mobile phone, okay? When you are the only one who sell that means that you are the only one who have that margin. But today, every couple of meters you find them, okay? So as a startup, don't look what people do and then you copy it. That's from my understanding. Okay? But then you create something that's called innovation. Right? At the beginning, no one wants to use it, but then at the end, when you already start far away and then everyone else start late, then they are far behind. So to answer your question, is there anything that we can develop as a business related to the culture? There's a lot. Yeah. I remember a couple months ago, me and the student, we tried to compete for the international competition. We tried to develop this multi-languages website that related to Balinese culture. We come up with the idea Balinese and Chinese culture. Because in Bali you can see there's many mix of Balinese and Chinese culture, which is no one has it. That means there's a good opportunity. But I don't know, because we haven't got the result yet, but from our understanding, that's a good business. If we can sell that one to the tourists or to anyone who would like to come to Bali, so then that's a good thing that we can do. Okay? So the next question is, what about the cross-culture, many interpretation? At the beginning, that's the reason why I talk about, in order to bring the culture into the digital form, don't just bring the culture and put into the digital form. We need to understand that. For myself, I try to put a simple thing, what we have here in Bali called kulkul, or in Indonesia called kentongan. It's not really easy. Okay? To put that into the digital form, we need to understand that. That's why in the beginning I mentioned about Balinese culture. It's quite fragmented. And many of the knowledge is still in the tacit form. We need to ask them. As a human, we really understand that. So when people do this, for instance, that I'm with you, people here in Bali, they usually born there, they live there, they died there. So we don't need an explanation. By doing this one, everyone will understand. Okay? But those now, because we talk about the main interpretation, because now in Bali, especially, we're moving from one place to another. For example, I'm basically come from Klungkung. It's basically from east of Bali. Okay, but then I live in Denpasar. I only go home to my ancestor or to my village is whenever we have a ceremony. And do we expect that I understand what the culture of that? No. Okay. What I try to say, what I try to do is try to search at the internet, but none of them are available. Okay. So what I try to emphasize in here is bring the culture in the digital form is really good. So then we don't see, if you look at people, the young generation, many of us, especially the elders said, the new generation, they don't want to continue the culture. From my study, that's not the case. The case is none of those information available on the internet. If you try to understand the thing, for my generation or younger generation, you go to Google. But what if no one ever write about that on the internet? How can you learn? Your parents expect you to go there and sit there the whole day, the whole month. You don't want to do that. This is the industry era 4.0. Everyone would like to do fast. If you're watching the YouTube, for instance, 30 minutes of tutorial. Have you watched really 30 minutes? No. Every couple of seconds, you press forward. I want to go to at the end. So the way that we present the information also in the digital form, we also need to understand the human. I hope that answer your question.
Okay, Prof. Giri.
Okay, thanks, moderator. Thank you, Matur Suksma Blimade. Correct, 100%. Yes, we do recognize that like as an example, like in Makassar or Lontara, they use double consonant. Makassar, double S. Ramang, double M, and so on. So they have their own unique character, which is why if we look into Arab Pagon, which is actually written in Arabic script, but since not all words in Java language can be represented in Arabic language or Arabic scripts, then they add certain things that to facilitate the usage of the Arabic script for the Javanese language. And we do recognize that. To make it more challenging, in each local scripts or ancient scripts, as an example in Java, there are so many variations of it, which is why we mentioned to the Javanese language community in the beginning of this year, if we want the industry to adopt it, then they need to follow the international or the national standard, which is in this case ISO, International Standard Organization, or the SNI, Indonesian National Standard. Once it is mentioned in the SNI, then it will be included in the ISO. Then the industry will adopt it. So in that case, we need to come up with standard. And together with the community, with the language community of the Javanese language, this year we have an event together with them on the Congress Aksara Jawa, Javanese Script Congress. And thankfully that they have already come up with standard. And nowadays we are actually working together to have, together with the community and also the government, to have standardization on the Javanese language, on the Sundanese language, on the Balinese language. More detail on that, we have Kang Ilham, who sat next beside me, who always inspired us, always mengilhami. So always inspired us on the ancient scripts or local scripts. Monggo, Kang Ilham.
Terima kasih. Thank you so much, Pak Yudo. Well, I think I can respond about the cross-culture aspect. Yeah, indeed, that the cross-cultural aspects on, especially on the script, that was used and is used in Indonesia today. It happens. Yeah. So, like in the past, the Kawi script, for example, the use of this script historically, it's about 1,000 years, I think. Yeah. It's about more or less 1,000 years. The script itself used by all the Malay language, all Sundanese language, all Javanese language, and I think all Philippines. So every language has its influence to the orthography, to the use of spelling, and so on. As mentioned by Pak Yudo, for example, the Arabic script that used in Indonesia has various influence from the local community, while in Malay realm, it used the Malay language with its orthography, which is different with Pegon and Serang. So the cross-cultural is indeed happen, and it feasible, and it's there. So I think so.
Yeah, I would like to add a bit about the question from Pak Made Adjana. As I mentioned earlier in the beginning, that Balinese, either Balinese culture or Balinese language is quite fluid. Yeah? That's why I basically mentioned about we adopt what we call Desa Kalapatra. Okay. In 2019, we have what we call Pesamuan Alit, which is we discuss what you asked the question earlier. We discuss how do we present that into the public era. As you know that in the beginning, all of the Balinese script, we don't have space between words. Okay. But then when we have that Pesamuan, everyone agree we should adopt that. Otherwise, that we can write a correct way in the public era. So basically, Balinese language or Balinese script is kind of fluid. Depend when do we use it. And I think we as Balinese, we agree with that. So we not really say that we need to stick what we have in the past. No. The Balinese community, the Balinese script community, we agree. Otherwise, that no one will use it. No, everyone will have to write Aksara Bali in the public era and public area, because we cannot translate. The best way is basically to translate that into the Balinese language. Then we write that into the Balinese script. But that's not the case right now. If we want to do it now, no one would like to write, and many times it's hard to find the synonym they have and try to find in the Balinese. No. So I think as a Balinese, I think we're quite fluid. I think we quite adapt with what we have right now. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I can add something. Yeah, maybe for the second question from Pak Made. So I can explain in English. For the alih digital, alih ejaan. So this is about transcription and like writing the loan word from English to Indonesian, like computer with C in English and K in Indonesian. So there should be a convention agreement about the language user, about how to pronounce, how to spell the foreign word. So if the case is airport name, Bandara Ngurah Rai, and then written down to the Balinese script, so it, in my view, it should use the Balinese convention on writing and spelling the word, not using the foreign. So it will be so weird when use like computer with C and write it down on Balinese with cha, it will be spelled as computer. It's so weird. So mostly the indigenous script is used to pronounce, to represent the sound of the spoken language. So that's the weirdness about English, I think, because inconsistency in English, what is written is sometimes mostly different what is spoken. So in the indigenous Indonesian script, mostly they are the same. What is spoken is what is written. So it's depend on the convention. Sometimes in one script, there are several conventions. For example, in Javanese, the convention for writing Old Javanese, or perhaps in Balinese also, it's different for writing the modern Javanese or modern Balinese language. So it's about convention, and it is optional. So thank you.
Okay, I think it's very interesting to talk about this, and I believe that there is also some solution for those issues. Yeah, next, yeah, just like what is explained by Pak Ilham just now, and Pak Cokordo also said that Balinese language is fluid. So we still can adapt some of the language that is still acceptable. Yeah, this is a very interesting issue, but I'm afraid we still have only 12 minutes left here. Yes, 12, yes. And we are also inviting questions from online or Zoom, if any. Sophie will help if there is, okay. There is a question. In the meantime, if you still have question from the audience here, from the floor, we also still invite maybe one or two questions.
Can I add something, Bu?
Oh, yes, please.
Unmute you after, please.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd like to draw your attention on two things.
Yeah.
First, Indonesia has a long history to unify our country. It's very isolated. So, the ideal form in the future is actually to make it intertwined. That's why we use the word merajut. So, as every local community like to maintain the existence of their local language, local script, I would like to suggest every local community make awareness of other scriptures, other languages, local language. So there are Javanese who really like to learn Balinese, there are Balinese who learn Batak, then it becomes an intertwining, widen our platform. Not only for the local community, then we have another problem if it is only for local communities. Then it becomes the previous Indonesia with all isolation for the local. Make aware all local communities that the existence of other scriptures in the region. And that will make the population wider for each local language. That is my first point. Second point, about phonetics. Andy maybe can take the initiative, not only the scripture, but also the library of phonetics. Like if we use a dictionary, we have that phonetic symbol to maintain and to keep tracking of the pronunciation. That will help everyone to pronounce it better. Only those 2 points. Thank you, Ibu.
Thank you, Pak Richard, for the additional information about intertwining the point of view of local language. Yeah, Ibu Sarah, I think raised the hands. Yeah, please, Ibu Sarah, if you have additional information.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to add something regarding the first question. Add something to what Pak Cokordo already mentioned. First, I can only emphasize the need for understanding the cultural context, as Pak Cokordo already raised it earlier, because I think it's really a key for the proper use of scripts and language. And second, two very short points. I think we have to distinguish two processes. there is a first process that is about bringing cultural features or language into the digital dimension. And it's actually a kind of archive, a work of archiving the resources I was mentioning earlier, and this requires a distance. Pak Cokorda mentioned that when you are part of this culture or this language, you don't ask what it means or what it is about, but you know it, you just perform it. Now, when you start to transfer it to another dimension, then you need to take distance in order to think on how you want to present it or to represent it. So this is the first point. So it has a structural change involved. Second point is that we can not only do that, but we can also use it as a resource for new creations online. And here I come back to my point about who are the natives here in the digital dimension. The natives are not the people who are transferring from offline to online, but actually the people who already are inside and who create with the sources, the other resources. So it's another problem. It's another process, actually. And I think it's important to distinguish them. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with generation. I mean, you have indeed young people, the youth is much more equipped and aware of this digital dimension than my father, for example. But it's mainly people who evolve in this dimension and who have the strong digital literacy that can actually create and use these sources as resources for new things right now in the cyber digital dimension. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your points, Ibu Sarah. Okay, we still have 6 minutes left. If there is something from the presenters, okay. Okay, Pak Ono, do you want to say something? Okay.
Well, I really hope we can work together, basically, as Pak Yudo mentioned. We work together so we can build the font into the system, operating system, and so on. And I really hope the language teacher at schools can use computer to teach language. Then this language will be embedded, included into the system, and make Pak Yudo work easy to negotiate with ICANN and so on. That's what mine really works. I hope the government can support us, and we should work together on this one. Thank you, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Pak Jo, you want to say final remarks? Okay.
No, I just want to give some experience that I have. That's why the reason why this work is very important. The reason why the Pandis work is very important. I remember when I was in Australia, there is a Balinese community, basically expatriate between the father probably Balinese, the mother probably Australian. They would like their kids to learn Balinese language and Balinese script, okay? And then they asked me to guide them. And their question was, where can I learn? Is there any material available on the internet? Is there any tools that we can use? The problem, we don't have it. So my point is, don't just think about people who live in Indonesia, those who live in Bali, but those also who live outside the island, which is those who really, really need that. They really, really appreciate what we have. That's the thing that we need to think about as well. Thank you.
Ilham, you want to say something?
Okay, maybe the last from me is, because I very often communicating with communities in various regions in Indonesia about the scripts. Most of them need support in terms of like cooperation with many stakeholders, like governmental stakeholders, and then private sectors to support their movements. By, like Pak Cokorda said, we need to provide resources, digital resources for them to make their movement more feasible. Thank you.
Okay, give applause for all the presenters. Okay, Pak Yudo. Okay, So as a conclusion, I would like to say that there is a huge homework for us together that we should do in the near future to raise the awareness of the importance of indigenous language to be used in our part of our life, especially in digital era. So thank you very much for your participation, and we appreciate it a lot, and we will see you in the near future. Together we can. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for all. I'm leaving from the forum. Thank you for everyone.
Terima kasih Pak Richard.
Thank you, Pak Ono. Thank you, Bu Sarah.
Bu Sarah, thank you. Thank you everyone.